I've always felt like I'm here on the planet to try to develop myself. So I try and step into things and be brave when I don't know what I'm doing and figure it out. And as I've gone along with everything, it doesn't just need to be career, it's everything in life. You realize that, most people don't really know what they're doing until they have a crack at it. And even you go, when you're 20, you're like, oh, that 50-year-old person's got it sorted out. No, they don't. They're just older and they're just doing more stuff and they don't really know either. So lots of times I've tried that, like when I was 17, I'd never been on a plane before, and I got on a plane to London. I never left Australia, and I had like $300 in my pocket, and I had a job lined up, and I had no idea where I was going, and it took me 6 hours to do a 1-hour trip once I got there because I didn't know how to use the trains. And I turned up to London in board shorts and a singlet because I didn't realise it was going to be winter in January. And so, and then, because I was a super shy kid. And then by the time I got back, I spent 12 months over there teaching French and coaching rugby. Didn't speak French, by the way. That was a bit of a embellishment on the resume. But then I came back and I had a whole new set of skills. So I was barely said a word to anyone before that. I came back, I couldn't stop talking because I had all this life experience that had come through that. And, and similar again, in 5 or 6 years later, I quit my job and went backpacking for a year because I thought, I need this. I need to step out of my comfort zone again. And the same thing keeps happening in my career. So I take things on and then I figure it out.
Welcome to the Yogi Triathlete Podcast. We are Jess and BJ, and this is the place we've been sharing stories of people looking, finding, and living their purpose since 2016. Look, none of us are here by mistake. And when we lean into the things we love and the things that come through us with ease, we also lean into purpose. This, of course, does not mean that we will not be challenged along the way. In fact, sharing our gifts certainly guarantees that life will call more to us. But hey, if we're going to be challenged, we may as well be doing what we love. That said, our guest today is Will McCloy, and from what I have gathered, Will is most certainly on the path to his purpose. As host and commentator for Super League Triathlon, it is apparent that many of Will's gifts come in the form of vocal artistry. And though his ability to skillfully report the constantly changing goings-on of this lightning-fast incarnation of triathlon, Will is so much more than a spectacular voice. He is a dad, reporter, journalist, traveler, producer, writer, presenter, and author of Before I Slip Away, a novel about personal and social connection, finding the courage to confront your past and the strength to shape your future. In discovering more about our guest today and my research for this episode, it appears he takes his work as seriously as the fun he has along the way. And those qualities equal someone who is doing what they love. Will came into our awareness with the birth of Super League in 2017, a vision manifested through the always edgy mind of Chris McCormack, one of our all-time favorite triathletes. It didn't take long for us to lock in on our desire to bring Will onto the show, and if you are a regular listener, then you know exactly what I'm going to say next. We knew that when the time was right, it would present itself, and it did. 1 month ago today, Will crafted a post on Instagram entitled Grateful, and that's when we knew the time had come, and thankfully, he said yes. And so, without a moment more passing, it is with deep gratitude that I say, Will McCloy, welcome to the show.
That was undoubtedly the best intro that I have ever received. And if you wouldn't mind recording that again for my voicemail, that would be ideal. I'm very flattered. I'm sweating with the gratitude that's coming out. That was amazing. Thanks for having me, guys.
It really is. I mean, it's like as soon as we heard you in 2017, and we've been in the sport for a long time, and we have endured hours and hours of vanilla, highly censored commentary with triathlon, and then out comes Super League, and with it comes you and Maka and Vicky and Alistair and all these great names and great voices, and you guys are having fun and you're celebrating suffering and pain and just the craziness of these courses. And so I think we're going to have two camps here that are listening. We're going to have the camp that's just like, they've got your poster up above their bed. Like, they're just like, yes, Will McCloy, that's it. Like, bringing the voice to Super League Triathlon, among other things. I know you're not just Super League. But then we're going to have this other camp that has no idea what Super League is. So what is Super League?
Well, that takes us back to about 2016 when Chris McCormack and another guy called Trent Taylor had gotten together and started talking about how we could bring back what happened in the early 2000s when Macca was racing. So here in Australia, we had the Formula One series, used to race down on Manly Beach. So it was short and sharp and fast and big crowds. And it was something that I guess played towards the casual viewer. Like you could enjoy the racing of it. It wasn't an Ironman where, you swim for an hour and everyone's bored and changes the channel. It was something that was gripping and it had big personalities, and Macca led the way. So for a long time, and I'm only saying this because I found out this later because I wasn't involved in triathlon at all, but for a long time, Macca was trying to find a way to resurrect that. And between himself, a guy called Michael Dolst, who is still the CEO of Super League Triathlon, and another guy called Leonid Boguslavsky, who's a big fan in an Ironman age group who just finished Kona himself. The three of them got together and then brought on a guy called Trent Taylor who does the events. And suddenly this idea was born of Super League Triathlon. So at the time I was working in a bunch of different sports, and I was just one of the names put forward to Macca to potentially be the guy that could host it, so do the presenting, etc. Now, commentary I'd never done before. So Macca chose me. I sat down with him. I had no idea who he was. Zero idea. He was like, I'm a world, he never said I'm a world champion or whatever. I was like, I better just Google him. Like, who is this guy, Chris McCoy? I'm like, all right, okay, yeah, no, okay. He did this thing called Kona that I've never heard of before, right? This is in 2016. You guys, everyone laughs when I say this. And then so the next thing I find myself on Hamilton Island, and 20 guys that were there, because we only had the men in the first one because we just couldn't, it was like a test event just to see if it worked. So we had 20 men, none of whom I'd ever seen before in my life, and this new format that went for 3 days, and everything was new. The television production was new. The people we brought on were new. I was new. And then Macca said to me, hey, can you commentate as well? Because I was meant to just be doing the presenting part. I'm like, yeah, that's fine, no worries. Never done commentary before in my life either. I just wasn't telling anybody that. I was like, I can handle that. That's fine. So new sport, a brand new job, had no idea what I was doing. But from the moment we started, there was this real energy about it because it was something that people were wanting. It was a made-for-television experience that we just wanted to take this great sport and these athletes that people didn't know outside this core group of fans and bring it to that audience that loves jeopardy in their sport, loves the personalities of the sport, of which they were just begging to be showcased, and just wants it all in an hour or two with lots of hype and lots of flashing colours. And we just want a triathlon to enjoy what all other sports enjoy in the space. And from there, we went to Jersey, we did another one, and then now we've only had 4 seasons because of COVID, but it feels like we've been around a lot longer and we keep developing. And I've just been there through the entire experience, and I've got a lot of other jobs, but when the Super League Triathlon calendar, like I'm always hounding Michael Dolst for the calendar for the year so I can make sure that I put all that time away and beg my wife for the time to go overseas. Because it's my favourite job by far. I just absolutely love it. It's really still got a startup vibe where we're still constantly finding ways to make it better. And I think that's reflected in the growth year on year.
How do you not get scared or fearful or manage those emotions of like, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm going to say yes? Like, is that just natural for you, or do you crave like this like unknown?
Oh, no, it's not natural. I mean, it's become natural, but I've always tried. I've always felt like I'm here on the planet to try to develop myself. Like, so I try and step into things and be brave when I don't know what I'm doing and figure it out. And as I've gone along with everything, it doesn't just need to be career, it's everything in life. You know, you realize that, you know, most people don't really know what they're doing until they have a crack at it. And even like you go, when you're 20, you're like, oh, that 50-year-old person's got it sorted out. No, they don't. They're just older and they're just doing more stuff and they don't really know either. So lots of times I've tried that, you know, like when I was 17, I'd never been on a plane before, and I got on a plane to London. I never left Australia, and I had like $300 in my pocket, and I had a job lined up, and I had no idea where I was going. And it took me 6 hours to do a 1 hour trip once I got there because I didn't know how to use the trains. And, you know, I turned up to London in board shorts and a singlet because I didn't realize it was going to be winter in January. And so, you know, like, and then, you know, because I was a super shy kid. And then by the time I got back from it, I spent 12 months over there teaching French and coaching rugby. Didn't speak French, by the way. That was a bit of a embellishment on the resume. But then I came back and I had a whole new set of skills. So I was barely said a word to anyone before that. I came back, I couldn't stop talking because I had all this life experience that had come through that. And, you know, and similar again, in 5 or 6 years later, I quit my job and went backpacking for a year because I thought, I need this. You know, I need to step out of my comfort zone again. And the same thing keeps happening in my career. So I take things on and then I figure it out. So, you know, and a good example of that would be I was doing the Gold Coast Commonwealth Games triathlon commentary alongside Emma Snowsill. And we'd done those 3 races. It went over 3 days. And then after that, the guys at the Com Games were like, oh, our Greco-Roman wrestling commentators pulled out. What do you know about Greco-Roman wrestling? And I was like, well, the same as everybody else, which is 0. And they said, well, it's on in 4 days. Do you want to do it? I'm like, yep, okay. 103 competitors from Nigeria and Pakistan and India. And I was the global commentator for that. But you know what? It went fine. You know, like you work it out. So you panic and you work it out. And I think that a big part of that is taking what everybody feels, which is this like, oh my God, I can't do this. I don't know what I'm doing, and channel it into a positive energy rather than a destructive energy. And I think that's how you grow. And that's why I end up working a lot more with people like Mako, who are continually pushing and finding new things to do and new ways to do it, because it's an inspiring, you know, place to be around, to be able to be with people who have that mindset.
So growing up are you rebelling from an overprotected upbringing, or were your parents, you know, instill like you can do anything? Were you adventurous as a child?
I was a super shy and anxious kid. So, you know, like I was very quiet. I was like, you know, I was always the kid who was getting bullied, never doing the bullying. I grew up like my primary school had 8 kids in it. And then I went to boarding school when I was like 1,500 kids. So and I had a difficult time at times during that. And I still deal with anxiety now. So like I take, you know, I'm on medication and have been for 20 years. And I meditate every day and journal every day and exercise every day to try and keep it all under control. And I've learned how to manage all of that. And I think that that's a very common thing for people to do in different ways. And a lot of times, you know, like the people who know me really well know about all of that as well. But, you know, most people think, oh, no, you know, he's on TV, he's doing this thing, his life's all sorted out, he's really cool. Like, it's a management thing, and I'm a human the same as everybody else. So there's times when I get super nervous or worried or stressed or anxious about things as well, just like everybody. And I think that, you know, you see these people on TV, or even you see triathletes and stuff, and you don't realise they've got so many things going on behind the scenes because they're just human people like everybody else. So, yeah, I was a super shy kid, and then I came back from the UK and I was, you know, ready to go. And so I did journalism at university and got a job at Channel 10 down here, which is one of the major networks and I started in news. So I did like 2 months of news, which was like drug busts and assaults and, you know, all the bad stuff that you see on the news. And I thought, that's just not for me. Like, they're so depressing. So then I switched and I went to the sports department. I did 6 years of motorsport there, Formula One, MotoGP, the supercar racing, etc. which was really great. And we did golf and tennis and a few other things that the network had the rights for. But I'd never done any endurance sports, as I said, until I met Macca and the Super League crew in 2017. And that's basically taken over now with all the other things we do with Phoenix and sub 7, sub 8, and a whole bunch of different things that are coming up in 2023 as well. So it's kind of taking over swim, bike, and run for me. It's not helped my waistline much, but it's definitely it's a great sport to be a part of because it's a real community, which is and a surprising lack of ego, even though you might not think so. But when you go and do like sports where everyone's making $1 million, it's a lot harder to get access to them. Triathletes are very welcoming and down to earth people generally.
So I thank you for sharing that, because I think this, this energy of anxiousness is so prevalent, and it doesn't need to be a secret, right? We live in a very anxious world. There's a lot of, as you learned from your news reporting days, there's a lot of dark, bad stuff. Like, not everything is okay. So even now, as you, you're still out in front of the microphone, in front of the camera, and still working with this type of energy and meditating and all of that, are there tools that you use on the fly? Let's say you're about to go live, and all of a sudden you're just like, whoa, here it is. Like, I'm feeling it. And you can even feel a little bit like in your body. Are there tools that you use that you can share for people that perhaps need before they're standing up at work for a presentation, or before they jump in for their first triathlon and they're, in front of that threat that they could possibly drown in the swim?
Well, I think anytime you're doing anything that pushes your boundaries, you're going to have that fight or flight or freeze feeling that everybody has, and it could be being on a podcast. It could be hosting a podcast. It could be anything. It could be standing up in front of a group of 10 people. It could be presenting at your work. It could be standing on the start line of your first 70.3, whatever that is. When you're outside your comfort zone, you're going to feel anxiety. So because I feel it a lot, I've worked out how to manage it, and so that I can take that energy of like, oh my God, I can't do this, and deliver that in a way that is, I guess, helpful or helps my job or help. And then at the end of it, I'm like, I nailed it. Awesome. And then I feel great. And then the next time's better. But for sure, something in the moment that I use is like, I do use breathing techniques. So beforehand, so it's like I always go like in for the count of 4, hold for the count of 2, out for the count of 6. And then I just go through that like 10 times. And I use these little, I do figure 8s on my fingers. So little figure 8, the top half, that's 4, and then hold for 2, and then a big one for 6, and I hold loads. And then after about 10 times through, everything calms, and then off we go. So, and I think that's the best one to use just in the moment, is just if your out breath is longer than your in breath, it's going to help you in terms of calming your heart rate down, calming that like sweaty feeling that you're feeling beforehand or whatever, and it just lets you get into the zone. It works for me, but lots of trial and error in terms of little things that work. But if you need something that goes for 30 seconds, like if I'm sitting in the car and the kids are fighting in the back and I'm like, no, it's all right, it's going to be fine. That kind of stuff. I only use it about 25 times a day. But I feel like there is a way to change that destructive energy into a positive energy and then deliver that. And I feel the same way as a triathlete does on the start line. It's like when the camera's about to turn on and the lights are about to go on and like 10 seconds and we're going live, and I know there's 21 million people watching Super League, and I'm like, by the time that actually happens, I'm like, nah, we're good. And then we're off. So doesn't matter how many times you do it, the 10 seconds beforehand, Macca and I look at each other and we're like, and then we do it. and then it just begins, So I don't think you ever get used to it. Doesn't matter whether you've been around for 50 years or not. It's still a bit stressful, but it's good stress.
Yeah, and the things are constantly changing with Super League. It's not like, here you go, here's the athletes that show up every time, and here's the rules. Even the rules change, like from race to race, like the short shoot or the time trial. Like all this stuff is constantly changing, and the point system, like being able to add up the points to see. So it's constantly there's a constant level of uncertainty that's like really in your face.
It is. It can. We've always got to be careful not to swing too far and alienate people because there's too much going on. But every decision that's made for Super League is made in order to create jeopardy throughout the race. So, as you know, like I will turn on, like if you turn on the Ironman World Championships, you're like, oh yeah, cool, that's happening. I'll come back in 4 hours when they're running, right? So or I get really excited about watching it, and then I watch it for about 5 minutes, and I'm like, oh man, this is hard. This is hard because there's no jeopardy until the end. So in Super League, yes, the race only goes for 45 minutes, but we want to make sure that there's always something happening that is material to the outcome of the race or the athletes within the race. And we also want to make sure that each athlete, if they're maybe not going for the overall win, they don't feel like they're able to win a race, they can still win money, they can still win a point score, they can still race against somebody. So, for example, you've got like your swim jersey winners. We had people who were just going for that. You've got the teams, so they're within their teams, and the team managers are telling each athlete, do this, deliver this for this person. And they buy into it and sacrifice themselves because they know if they win the teams, there's a big chunk of cash and the team's check, and the team victory to take as well. And then obviously you've got your overall race getters. So someone like a classic example is someone like an Emma Jeffcoat, who was racing for the Scorpions under Macca and Michael Gilliam's managership, and she is an excellent swimmer and an excellent biker, and she took a ton of points in the swim and bike. She probably knew she wasn't going to be able to outrun a Georgia Taylor Brown or a Sophie Colwell or a Cassandra Beaugrand, but she knew that if she really dug into the points and picked up a ton, then she could walk away with a big slice of the 120,000 US in the end that was for the teams. And also give herself a very good chance of picking up a spot in Super League for 2023. So, that's very important for them. And obviously she did a great job, delivered tons of points, and the Scorpions got home by 2 points, which meant that they won the teams thing. They picked up some good money, and they, there was a real team element to it. So that's what those constant evolutions are for. And we're going to see more in 2023 again. We're still settling on what the best formats are, and that's why you see things changing. But we're not content with it being pretty good or really good. We want it to be perfect, so that if you don't know anything about triathlon and you click it on and it just happened to come across it, and within 5 minutes you're like, gee, this is all right. And then you look down, you're watching like, an hour and a half went past and I didn't notice. I watched the whole thing. That's what we want to bring to Super League. That's what we wanted to bring to sub 7, sub 8 when we did it as an Ironman. That's what we want to bring, not this, we'll flick it on, it's boring, or I don't understand what's happening, so I'm going to leave. It's like, what's happening here? Like, there's always something going on. So that's what continually happens with Super League, and that's what we're going to continue to do endlessly until we have a product that is flawless. And then when we have a product that is flawless, the game will have changed, and we'll change it again.
Yeah, absolutely. I said to BJ this morning, I said, the thing about Super League is even, WTS, of course, Ironman, 70.3 distances, even the 100Ks that the PTO are putting on. When I get up to go into the kitchen and make a cup of tea, or I go let the dog out, I'm like, just keep it playing. It's fine. But with Super League, I'm like, pause it. We've gotten into arguments like, pause it. You didn't pause it. Now you have to go back. We have to go back because you don't want to miss a second. I don't want to miss an instant of it. And I heard Macca describe it as like he wanted it. He didn't want it to be like a symphony in the park. He wanted it to be like a rock and roll concert. Just somehow you guys do it where there's a lot coming at you, but you're also not. I'm not overwhelmed. I'm not like, oh God, I need a break from this. It's so engaging. But behind the scenes, is there stuff going on behind the scenes where you're just like, maybe you guys are misstepping, but nobody really knows that that's happening because you're just
rolling with it,
or creating a new rule in the moment?
It has happened before. At the very beginning, there was one example where we did our first, I think it was the second race in Jersey, where we had an eliminator. I think it was the first time we'd done an eliminator, and it was for the women, and Katie Zafiris at that time was dominant. So she was hammering the rest of the field. And we had the 90-second rule as well. So we're running the eliminator, so people were getting cut from the back. And then we had the 90-second rule cutting people on top of that. So about halfway through the race, I turned to Macca and I was like, we're going to run out of people. Like, there's not going to be any more people left, right? And he's like, and we're doing the math. Well, we're trying to do the math, right, while it's actually happening. And there's no ad breaks, right? So there's no like, oh, we'll have 5 minutes to work out what we're doing when we come, and then we'll come back. It was like, I'm trying to do the maths on the screen and I'm also commentating at the same time, and Mac is looking at it, and we're not smart with the maths, right? So we're like, and I'm pressing the button like, can we confirm that if this keeps happening, that in 10 minutes we're only going to have Caddy Zephyrus left? And the producers are like, hang on, we'll find out. And we're all like banging the keyboards trying to figure it out. So that's where the Super 6 rule came in. So midway through the race, we're like, okay. I said, turn off the microphone. I'm like, we need to make up a rule, right? And then Mac is like, and we're talking about it. We're like, Super 6. Maybe if we call it Super 6, then we'll just stop eliminating people once we get to 6 people. Yeah, cool. All right. Guys, we're going to do Super 6 rule, right? This is in the middle of the race. So then we stopped eliminating, and then they went down to Michael Thompson, who was on the ground, and was like, so stop eliminating people when we get to 6. So when we were still learning as we went along at the beginning, because we wanted to do stuff that was fresh. And so that's how we avoided Katie having a victory lap of 2 laps just jogging around, smiling, because we never realised that she was going to be so dominant. So in those beginning days, we were still making that stuff up. We weren't making the stuff up as we went along, but we were still adjusting with each race and each day of racing. I was like, well, how was that? How did that work? Was that good? How can we change it? How can we make it better? And the only thing that's changed now is that instead of talking about that every night after racing, we're now doing one championship series and then sitting down, or even just doing one round and going, what can be better? How can we make it better? How can we improve it? So we sit down with the television people, we sit down with the SLT people, and we're like, what happens now? So already we're having these discussions about arena games coming up in February and March and April. How can that be better? And that was just a COVID pivot doing that indoor racing, but now it's become its own series, which is awesome. And it's got, we see other people come to the fore, which wouldn't normally. But we're going to see new stuff and different stuff and better stuff each time. So in our 4 rounds of arena games in February, March and April, we'll adjust again about how can we make the telecast better and how can we make the racing on the ground better as well.
So this fluidity and let's just call it detachment, right? Because you're not attached to how things have to go. You've set the precedent. So it's all about the interest and the excitement and anticipation of what could happen. Just curious, taking a little tangent here, the news with Ironman and the 2 days. What's your perspective on that? Because it totally like deviates from anything that's been created from Super League.
Yeah, I mean, it's far be it from me to make comment on the decisions of Ironman. They've got reasons for what they do, and I mean, it's obviously split opinion. And you've seen, you only have to type Ironman into Twitter, but if you want to see the storm of outrage that has been created, and people are like, what about the triathlon power couples? How are they going to cope? And I'm like, well, I don't know, but just putting it out there, but the man could go and support the woman. I know that would be fine. Like, that's cool. Like, we can do that. I don't hate it. It didn't immediately tell me, because I'm on the inside of a organization in triathlon. I understand that these decisions have to be made. They're not going to make everybody happy. I think Nice is an awesome course, and I think it's a reasonable idea, but I think that it's I'm sure there's a lot of factors that have gone into that decision, and I hope that the only one isn't money and getting more money, because Ironman's $1 billion company and they could afford it. But for me, I think I understand the pushback of 2 days at Kona and how expensive it is and how hard it is and how and Nice will be cheaper. So, for example, like you can go and book your accommodation and travel from the UK and it's going to cost you €1,000 total, as opposed to ungodly amounts of money to go to Hawaii. It's all right for you guys. It's not so good for the rest of us. But if it helps more people do the sport and it increases the number of slots and it makes it more accessible for people, then it's going to be good in the end. I think that the traditionalists probably, want it to be at Kona, and there's lots of people who only race if it is there. but it's not achievable for a lot of people. It's going to cost you $10,000 to do it. So people hate change, but you know, and we make, and there are lots of people who go, this Super League's silly. You know, it's not sport, it's not triathlon, because it needs to be swim, bike, and run in that order, and it needs to be of this distances, and it needs, you know, and we do fight against that. But there are far more people that go, this is fun to watch. And then because they turn on, that the money from the advertising goes into the pockets of the athletes, and we become a more professional sport. So if that helps do that, then awesome. Also, it creates 2 per year, so there's more stuff to watch and more exposure and greater fields and more focus on the women too, which is good. I think that was one of the big wins from this year, that they had their own day to race on and didn't get swallowed up in the men's race, even though they could definitely spend more time showing us what's happening outside the top 3. I did feel like there was a lot of focus on the front of the race and none on the rest of the race. But, you know, that's their decision. That's nothing to do with us.
I think it's such a testament to the triumph of marketing. Like, they've literally marketed an island that is synonymous now with this championship race, and to pull that away is creating this incredible outrage. But there's a loss, like people, so they're going through like stages of grief and loss, right? They're going to be angry, and then under that anger, there's going to be sadness, and with time, they're going to heal, and it's going to be okay. But I mean, Ironman is a company that has such a power in their marketing department that people are, you know, tattooing their corporate logo on their bodies, and they have been for a very long time. And they branded this island as their world championship, and now they need to kind of untangle that, because not everyone, but a lot of people wanted the growth of the sport, and with the growth of the sport has to come change, because you cannot have 8,000 people racing in that tiny little town on one day. It's just not going to happen. And all you have to do to get a local's point of view is take an Uber ride from the airport into town, and you'll hear about what they think about Kona being in town. So, you know, they're a business, and they have a right to expand that business and make decisions. And letting go is tough, and something that you had planned to do. It's going to be tough for a lot of people. But I want to spin it back to Super League. You had talked about a little bit of pushback, and you guys have a commentary, which I really enjoy. And I cannot believe that people don't think that Super League Triathlon is triathlon. So I'm having a hard time understanding that belief system, because I'm a big fan. But I mean, it was like, finally we have some commentary that is just, it's fun. And they're like, you know, there was a horrible transition. And, you know, you guys have you had any pushback on that, on kind of your banter? And sometimes there's a little bit of rubbish talk.
There is, and it's a fine line, you know, because, I mean, we're both, when you've got Macca and me together, we're both Australians, and Australians have a certain way of doing things, and it sometimes can be, we've got to be a bit careful. So, like, a good example is, we're in Mallorca. We're doing the Mallorca round in 2018, and there was this big hill, and at the top of the hill there was a church. So during the commentary, we're calling it the Church Hill, right? And so then in the first half an hour, we're calling it the Church Hill, and then we started calling it the Winston, because it's the Winston Churchill, right? Which is funny for us, right? But then we're like, and they're going up the Winston again, and then people are like, what is this? What are you talking about? Like, you know? So, like, you know, there's this Australian way of doing things, which is a bit of larrikinism. It's a little bit, you know, it's what it is. It's what you hear. But we've also got to be careful that, you know, we take into account the fact there's a global series, and people want to, you know, they want to be entertained, but we can't just sit around making in-jokes all day either. So there's definitely a line that we've developed and a certain style that I've tried to develop with this sport, whilst knowing that I'm an outsider coming into the sport and trying not to put anyone offside. But being in the spotlight in this realm, or any realm, and it's the same for the other sports I do, there are some times when I need to turn my Twitter account off, for example, because I suddenly get a whole bunch of, like, you know, people want to get on there and go, you're rubbish, what is this? This is ridiculous, blah, blah, blah. But I have to say that in the triathlon world, that's been minimal, because I think people have enjoyed the fact that there's another option. and something a little bit different than what had been coming before for a long time. And they'd been kind of crying out for this like entertainment package, because what was offered sometimes in triathlon was, even for the diehard, was hard watching sometimes. And there was a certain distance, or a narrative distance, between the viewer and the action. So sometimes you feel like the action was happening over there and the commentators were talking about it, or they were talking to each other and the action was happening over here, and it was the separation where there was, long camera shots, and the athletes might be going, well, that reminds me of 1986 when this thing happened, and then I'm like, I'm just dying of boredom. And what we wanted to do was just decrease that gap. So I'm like, we were always like close-up shots of the faces. We want to see the emotion of the athletes. We want to hear from the athletes, and we want to talk about what's happening in the moment with those athletes, so that there's none of that separation between this is happening in the background, but we're also talking about what happened in 1994. And it was helped by the fact that there was always action. There wasn't a long swim or a long ride where suddenly you have to fill in those gaps with, just random chat because you're just fluffing. So we wanted to get rid of all of that dead space. And, even with the arena games, we're even shortening the telecast even more next year, so that there's no downtime. There's no time to change channels or go to the toilet. You're going to have to pause the TV, Jess. Okay, so in the arena games, there's going to be no time at all. Otherwise, by the end of it, you're going to be busting, right? Either that, or you're going to get a television in the bathroom.
I love that you're not bringing this, let's call it baggage from history of the sport. Like, you're in it, it's a fresh perspective. It's fresh. It's new. It's engaging. It's live. And I can't tell you how many times we've just been like, oh my God, like, we just want to have some personality there, some conversation. And so I think it's refreshing that you don't have that history with the sport. You've said it many times, like 2017 is your first experience and your birthplace with the sport of triathlon. And I think that's actually a benefit. That's like an asset coming into this sport, and then being able to work with Macca, and then also to pull in like Alistair. Like, if you want to talk about a commentating like gemstone right there that had the three personalities together, it's amazing, and you guys play off each other so well. I think the future is bright for this package of media. Let's call it media for the sport. I think back to your point about the cameras, like the boats are like literally right there by the swimmers with the camera and the boom like hanging over, and bringing that engagement is everything. It's what we want to see. So I hope it just never ends. I hope there's just like more and more racing.
Well, I think we're going to have 9 races next year. We're going to have 4 arena games and 5 championship races, and then we're always looking to build on that, and we'll go as long as we can. We have to find areas in the calendar that is going to allow our athletes to do that. And obviously, when we head into Paris, it gets harder and harder in terms of what their requirements are, and to get points for their federation to go to the Olympics. But we're established enough now that athletes will make the choice. And maybe one day we have athletes that specifically are aiming at short course racing. Like, we can have a calendar that's big enough that you go, okay, well, I just choose this. That, like, I choose not to try to go to the Olympics. I choose to go on the Super League tour and be well paid and looked after, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe it comes to that, but at the moment we find spaces and do what we can, and with the blessing and benefit of working together with World Triathlon, it's not that difficult to do. So I think you're right in terms of I came in from other sports, Formula One, netball, rugby, et cetera, and I came into triathlon and I was like, there could be a bigger show here. There can be more. Like, we don't have to be so humble about triathlon. We can shout it out, like in the same way you're watching the NFL or whatever, and you're like, and they're right in your face, like, this is the best thing that's ever happened. well, that's what we should be doing. Why are we not? We've got all these amazing athletes. And on the first time, we had like Javier Gomez and Alistair Brownlee and Richard Murray and Henry Schumann, and all these guys were there. And I was like, these guys can be superstars of this, you know. And then I found out that they already were superstars, but just in this little area, just in this little echo chamber of triathlon, and these huge stars. Like, to give you an example about how much I didn't necessarily know at the beginning, I remember rocking up to Hamilton Island, and I'd done so much study. So like I'm a notorious overstudier. That's one of the benefits of like being anxious about all these things. I channel it into like, you know, hours and hours and hours of study. So I knew everything. I knew what Javier Gomez liked to eat for breakfast on Wednesdays. Like, I was in it, you know, but it was all on paper, right? So, but actually putting faces to names and meeting them, I had never done any of that. I didn't know anyone. So we had Emma Snowsill, who was our co-host in Hamilton Island. Now, I knew about Emma Snowsill, right, because I'd Googled her. Like, I was like, right, I know she's Australian. I go, oh, okay, like she won a gold medal, and I had all this list of stuff, you know. So, and then I was talking to her, and I was like, she's like something about her husband, and I was like, oh yeah, well at least you've got the gold medal over him. And she looked at me like, she's like, you know that Jan won a gold medal, and I was like, yeah, yes, 100%. Nah. I was like, who is that? if he's not on this list of people, I don't know who he is, you know. And so now it's funny to look back, because it's been like 6 years and I've been really immersed in the sport, and you know we're shooting with Jan next week in Bahrain, but at the time, nothing. Like, I was like, yeah. Oh yeah, Jan Frodeno, yeah, that guy. Yeah, isn't that funny? It's funny now.
That's
like
awesome.
But the amount of background work that I do would give you anxiety. Like, it's very important when you go into a sport that's niche. Like, and I wish we didn't refer to triathlon as a niche sport, but in a global sense, it probably still is. And I do a lot of sports like that. You've got to honor the people that love it as well as the people that don't. So that if you turn up unprepared and call someone the wrong name or give the wrong stat, I think that's doing a dishonor not only to that athlete, but also to the television broadcast crew and to the organizing crew as the pointy end guy who gets to go on the big podcast like this and do all the cool stuff. You've also got to honor the work of every other person behind the scenes that is putting this thing together. So if you turn up unprepared, even a little bit, I think that's not fair to everybody who puts so much work into it. So that's why I do a lot. But I tell you what, I got to do the extraneous stuff like whose husband's won a gold medal. Otherwise, there's going to be problems.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because the power couple thing is real.
Yeah. Yes, it is. And that they're the original, one of the original power couples. Those two.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you study their names, because that's one thing. Like, if I've done pretty well at self-regulating my fire over the years through meditation, but the thing that makes me crazy is when I'm listening to well-established triathlon broadcasts, and the names are they're so far from what they truly are. And it makes me crazy. I'm always yelling at the screen.
Yeah, I actually had someone's mum text me once and say, "Thank you so much for getting my son's name right. Nobody has ever done that." And I'm like, "Oh, well, I only just asked him what his name was. That's it." It was, well, I can tell you, it was Vasco Vilasa. So Vasco Vilasa's mum was like, "Thank you so much for getting Vilasa right," because you still hear Vilaka every time. And you're like, mate, that's not it. Like, no one's asked him, how do you say your last name, dude? Like, it's easy to do that. So the one I always still get wrong is Vincent Lewis, because everybody says it's wrong. Not wrong, everybody says it differently. Sometimes it's Vincent Louis, sometimes it's Vincent Lewis, sometimes it's Vincent, sometimes it's Vincent. It's the shifting sands of Vincent Lewis, but it's actually Lewis in the end because he's Portuguese and not French, but everybody says Louis because they expect it to be. But he's like half Portuguese. Anyway, this is the background that has to be done.
We didn't know that.
That's
I
good.
feel like it's gone through waves. It was like Louis for like 2 years, and then Lewis for a year. It seems like they go through like blocks of time where they just get on the bandwagon of what the name is.
Well, he just goes, just call me Lewis, whatever you want.
Yeah, he probably doesn't.
You're like, come on, man.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a star. I do whatever. You call me whatever you want, doesn't matter. Everybody knows who I am.
I want to switch gears a little bit because I want to talk about the book that you wrote. I happened to find that in my research, and it just seems like a really important message. It's a fiction book, yeah, because it's a story. But what inspired you to write that?
Well, I think, and when I go back and look in my laptop for the first iterations of that book, it goes back to 2014 when I started, and I didn't publish it until 2021. So it's kind of like a 7-year process during which time I got married, had 2 kids, started working in triathlon, traveled around the world. So I just kept getting put back. But at that time and throughout that time, when you work in television and you put a lot of work into each live broadcast, when that live broadcast goes to air, then it just disappears. No one ever records it. It's not worth much the next day. There's no tangible thing like when you paint a house or you mow a lawn or you build something and you go, look at what I did. This is the thing I did. So I wanted to do something that had that outlasted me. Whereas rather than, and I used to write for like publications and stuff, and then it would just go in the bin the next day and the news disappeared and went, the news from 2 weeks ago, you don't remember that, so like I wanted something to do something that was tangible, but also something that was close to my heart. So the book is about a kid who deals with anxiety and which makes him do odd things and make strange decisions. And then he ends up meeting an old man who, and assisting this man to help break his wife out of the hospice before she dies so they can be together. But all sorts of crazy stuff happens along the way. But the main messaging is about the prevalence of anxiety and mental illness and separation and isolation in our society. So how important social integration is, how important it is to support each other. And it's a young adult fiction novel. So it's now in a lot of libraries at schools and in curriculums and stuff like that, which is fantastic. Because I want to normalize the stigma around that kind of stuff, because a lot of people deal with things like that, especially teenagers and things like that. So a lot of that main character is me. I bring parts of myself to it, like everybody does. And I want to do something that was nothing to do with sport, nothing to do with, the stuff that I do the rest of the time. So I put a lot of love into that book. It's kind of heartbreaking because I wrote it was like 100,000 words. And then the publisher was like, it's really great, but can you cut out 35,000 words? And I was like, what? Anyway, so I had to go through and slash it all. And now it's out and you can buy it in bookstores and stuff, which for me is really still very strange. It's only been out for 12 months. But when I get a review or someone messages me on Instagram or whatever, or leaves a review on Amazon or whatever, that to me, when someone says that they love this book or that it meant something to them or they cried at the end of it or something, it's so much more meaningful to me than when someone goes, hey man, that was a really good commentary call or whatever, because I put so much more of myself into it that it's it always still knocks me for 6 when people, say that. So go and buy it. It's like $1 on Kindle. Like, come on. It's not expensive.
It literally is $1. It's like $1.05.
I cut it. I just cut all the prices because I've made zero money out of this, by the way. Like, it's not something that I've made money out of considering how much time I put into it. And I never wanted to, which is why I put the prices at like basically nothing, because I just want people to read it so that they might give it to their teenage son, or they might see something in themselves in it and it might help them, or it just might mean something to them. So that's why, and I think I looked at my royalties and I made like, I don't know, $100. Not much. Like, I make a minuscule amount of cents per book, but I don't care about that. I just want people to watch. I just want people to read it and enjoy it and for them to get something out of it. So I don't treat it as a job, but I will do more, but only because I want people to connect with each other.
Yeah, and the book is called Before I Slip Away, and I was reading the reviews on it, and it really has touched a lot of people, and I think that is, I think that's what a big part of why we're here. We're here to connect with one another. I believe we're more similar than we are different, and the things that we traverse are, in their essence, it's exact. So it's a beautiful offering to the world.
Well, and in the same way that what you guys do, I've been listening to your podcast since you guys reached out, and there's a real, it's not a spiritual element, but the way you guys talk and the way you guys are talking about things like that, that's what vibe with me. And I was like, yes, 100%. So in the same way that I write a book and I put it out there for people to take, you guys are making a podcast. It's the same thing. So that's why I'm here. And I think that's why I appreciate what you guys do as well.
Yeah, I think it's that before we hit record, we asked you, is there anything off the table? Like, is there anything we shouldn't talk about? And you said, no, I'm an open book, and that's what we are too. Mm-hmm. And I think when you can just get past that veil of, and it's really like this egocentricity, like, oh, what are people going to think of me if I'm an open book and I tell them, whatever, I did this thing and it's not socially acceptable, or I feel guilty about it, or I regret it. You actually realize that people don't care that much. And if there is any kind of feedback or any sort of outrage or pushback or whatever, it's very temporary. And it actually has more to do with them and what they're navigating in their life than me living as an open book and living in an authentic way. And in recent years, that's kind of been almost like a buzzword, right? Like authenticity. We want authenticity. For me, that really was blown up in my face during a yoga teacher training when our teacher said, like, it takes no effort to be you. And I thought, what? Like, it takes so much effort to be me. But for you to be an open book, which I think is synonymous with being authentic, what is the essence of authenticity? How does it feel to you?
I think that's probably a good point when you say it doesn't take any effort to be you, and you think, what, it does. But I think the effort goes into making sure that the way you present yourself protects yourself from judgment. So, if you wake up in the morning, you're like, I have to be a certain way in order to protect myself from people judging me. That's what takes so much effort. Like, so then, you get trapped in this, like, I'm acting like a way that I am not really inside, which I did for lots of years because, when you're a teenager and in your 20s and stuff, you're mostly worried about what other people think about you. And it was tiring to be that, and then as you get older, as I got older, and I just stopped giving a shit as much. And it's only really been in the last 2 or 3 years when I've really been like, whatever, and stop trying, that things have gotten to be easier for me. But it takes a lot of like when you say it doesn't take any effort, it does take courage to strip away all those layers and just be like, okay, yeah, man, I take antidepressants. Yeah, man, I got anxiety. Yeah, I gotta be honest about this stuff because other people have it too. So me not saying anything is not helping anyone else, So yeah, I'm going to write this book and it's going to be raw and it's going to make people cry, but they're also going to go, that guy has a problem the same as this guy in the book, And you got to be like, you know what? Everybody does. So I'm just going to I'm trying to lead my own way and I'm not so arrogant to think that I would be an example for anybody else because, I've got lots of flaws like everybody. But if I can just be myself, finally, it will be easier for me in the same way that your yoga teacher would say that. It is easier once you get the courage to just drop all the pretense and be yourself, and some people are not going to like it, and that's okay. But it does take courage to get to that point. So, 2 years ago, I joined a group of men here in Australia who have all kind of banded together in a group and we keep each other accountable for meditating every day, journaling every day. We get on a big round table discussion every week, talk about our feelings, talk about what's going on with us, right? And it's only for men who are over 35. So, and it's open to anyone in the world. It's called Rising Kings. It's a fantastic program and it keeps you accountable for this kind of thing. Physical stuff, family connection stuff, making sure you've got a good connection with your partner, all that kind of stuff, working with your kids to make sure that you're the best dad, the best human, the best business leader that you can be. And doing that made me realize that every single man, because there's some big tough dudes in this thing, right, covered in tattoos, but they're all going through some stuff, and it's all the same stuff, but nobody says anything about the stuff. So that when you actually dig under and they're like, I'm just scared that I'm not going to be the best person I can be, or I don't like my reactions to things, or I haven't got a good relationship with my wife because of this, and this happened to me when I was a kid. Doesn't matter how big you are and muscly you are and covered with tattoos you are, you got the same stuff. And it doesn't matter whether you're in California or Australia, you got the same stuff, or whether you're on TV or run a podcast or are a yoga teacher or anything, everyone's got similar stuff. So once I realized that, I was like, oh, well, I'll just be me. And yeah, for sure I'll probably get less negative feedback now than I did when I was trying really hard to be someone who I wasn't, because that's what I thought would be the right thing to do if I was going to get to the top of this thing or the top of that thing. And then when I detached from that and I was like, I'm just going to be me, I think I've connected with people a little bit better on a personal scale, and then also through whatever TV or radio or whatever I'm doing. I just think that people notice when you're an authentic human and you're just like, okay, here's all of me with all my good bits and pieces, and I'm really putting a lot of effort into what I'm doing for you guys, whether it be, commentary or whatever. And people go, well, I respect that. That's great. And I think that's the same that people can put in their life in any spot.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful. Wow. Yeah, I think detachment, just detaching from this all, is really just allows us to be who we are. But I think the thing that comes into play there is like, and you've got 2 young daughters, right? It's like you've got to let them have their experience, right? Like the path that you've lived and that now, like we almost want to like save them and be like, oh, you don't have to care about what people say. You can like just forget it. But that's not how it is. It's not. Oh,
it's one of the great like things that I'm trying to work on at the moment is not controlling. Like I'm like, because I see them doing the same things that I would do, and I'm like, no, you don't have to go down this path. You don't have to care about this. You just don't have to. And they're like, but then you got to realize they got to do their own. They've got to make their own errors. They got not make their own mistakes. They just got to live their own life, and I've got to not try and control or shield them from things. Because I see my eldest, going down. She's growing up and she's about to be 8, and she's starting. There's all this world opening up to her, and I'm like, oh my God! Like just stay here as long as you can. You don't need to. But then everyone's got their own path to follow. So, and I'm still learning about who I am, and I'm 40 in a couple of months, and it's going to be an ongoing process forever. And it's the same way as I don't think there's ever a solution where you're like, oh, I've arrived at who I am now, and this is it. I've achieved it, so now I can just sit here and do nothing. It's just like a constant process of introspection, and just seizing opportunities as they come up, like I try to do, and then just instead of detaching from this like idea of what I wanted to do when I was a kid, and I thought, I'm going to be on television, I'm going to be this guy, and I'm going to be this guy because then if I have this job, then everybody's going to respect me so that I can feel protected and not vulnerable because I'm going to have this role in life, in society, so then I'm going to be a big deal. And then as I've detached from that and I've gone, I don't need that because I've become more steady in my own self, then all these opportunities start flooding in to get to that. Like when you detach from the outcome, suddenly you're like, oh, now this thing. Oh, now I'm going here. Oh, now. And then you look back and you're like, holy shit, I did some shit this year. Look at that. And I didn't think about it at the time, but then you add it all up and you're like, oh, maybe if I stop trying so hard, the opportunities will come. Like the energy of the universe will reward me. And, I do so much, and we could get into all of that because I read a lot of weird books, like a lot of like real esoteric stuff about energy and the universe and consciousness and stuff, do a lot of learning. But that's seeped in. And as I've kind of gone, no, I'll just do it this way. And then, and not panic on the outcome. Then suddenly all these doors open up. They're always there, but I never had access to them in my conscious space, but now I do. And there's a lot more doors that are going to open up soon. I'm just looking forward to walking through them when they arrive, but not panicking about them not coming.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. You're totally speaking our language.
I thought I might be. I could tell from the background. No one can see the background with the Buddha and all the floral stuff. I was like, yeah, these people, we'll be cool. We'll understand each other.
Yeah, it's so good. Because, the fact is, Will, we need more of you to be you, and we need more of BJ to be BJ, and we need more of Chris to be Chris, and we need more of Vincent Louis to be, or Lewis to be Vincent Lewis. Like we are unique, and there's nobody like you, and there's nobody like me. And so when we kind of work to fit into some kind of framework that we think will allow others to accept us, more easily is insanity, because everybody is seeing the world through the lens of their own mind, which is their history and their celebrations and their traumas. And so it's such a fruitless journey. And you're about to turn 40, and I just turned 50, and 30s were awesome. 40s are awesome. And I'm starting to realize that 50s so far is like, it's the highest level of I don't give a shit that I've experienced in my life.
Good.
And I'm thinking that's just going to continue.
Yeah, I'm all for it. I mean, part of me hanging out, like, especially when you go on Super League stuff and all these guys like 23, 22, and you're like, oh my God, look at them. They can just train, and then they can just train again the next day without feeling like they're going to have an aneurysm. And like, they've got this like vitality to them because they're in their like physical prime. But then if I really thought to myself, do I want to go back to that? I think, no, thank you. No, like I might have been physically, in my prime at that stage, but mentally nowhere near that, and all the work I've done to get to this point, I'm not going back on that, not 100 years. Like I'm very happy to be here. And I think that if you continually work on yourself, you don't end up having a midlife crisis. I'm probably not going to end up getting a red sports car because I'm just always doing little work to get to be very happy with where I am. But it's constant work. It's like renovating a house. And if you continually renovate a little bit, you don't end up with an old wreck that you need to knock down and start again. So, yes, I would never trade it. So, and I'm sure you wouldn't either to go back to that. It'd be nice to go back, but only if you knew everything you know now. Then you would dominate. Like then if I could be 15 but have the knowledge of a 39-and-a-half-year-old, that would be perfect. But other than that, no, thank you.
Yeah. And there's a reason why they're not putting 50-year-olds in those Super League uniforms.
I do have one, actually. I have two. I have one is Jake Birtwhistle's, and there is no way on God's green earth I will fit into that. Like I can get one leg into it. But I do have Christian Blumenfeld's as well, and I can fit into Blumenfeld's race suit, but it doesn't leave a lot to the imagination, I'm telling you.
That's awesome.
I don't wear it outside.
Gosh, that's got to be your Halloween costume for sure. You got to be Christian Blumenfeld. Oh my gosh, I love it.
It will scare the children.
No candy for you. Oh my gosh, Will, I've so enjoyed this last hour with you, and really grateful that you came on the show to share yourself with our audience. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Will. Really appreciate it.
Not at all. Thanks for continuing to push the platform of authenticity with people, because I think, sometimes if I was going to come on here and we could talk a lot about triathlon, and that would be a great chat. But it'd probably be the kind of chat that people would listen to and be interested and then immediately forget about afterwards. So when you dig a few layers back, it's always, you really speak to the human experience, I suppose, no matter what or where we come from. So I think that's cool, and that's why I've enjoyed it so much. So thank you for having me.